To my daughter, things I wish I would have told you. You already hold things against me that I told you. You were little. You didn't understand. It was a time when I was very afraid of forced vaccination. It was that Obama administration, and he had put out an emergency edict that everyone was going to have to be vaccinated, and there was great controversy and nurses who were refusing vaccinations, much like the pandemic. Where do I begin? I guess I'm going to start with the late 80s, the 1980s. Our motorhome, which was very old, kicked out because we didn't think to check the oil. And I think it ran out and we burnt out the rings and valves, or maybe it was already on its way out, though it didn't seem that way. We used it for a while, and in Ohio we realized the gig was up and we traded it in for a van. Your dad bought me a really old, I thought it was a 91 Chevy Malibu, but I think it was an early 80s or maybe even a 70s, because we're talking about it wasn't even 1990 yet. So I had this old Chevy Malibu. That would be okay for a while, but then cause us a lot of trouble later on. So your dad left me, Rachel, Denny Jr., and Michael with his father, Henry, which nearly drove me to insanity, but for 3 months I managed the best I could, and then I called him and said, "Save me!" Henry, I did everything wrong. Dennis Jr. was having really bad asthma attacks. He was only, I'm not sure. I know Michael was with us, and I think he was 3, so Denny might have been 6. I think that's correct. Anyway, Dennis calls me, your dad calls me one evening while he's driving down the road in the new van. It was a Chevy 91 something, a big, big cargo van. Bless his heart. And he said, "I just heard something really disturbing on a talk show on the radio." And he asked me to go buy this book. I think by then it was by Gary Kah, K-A-H. And he was sounding an alarm about what was happening in the shadow government, I guess is the best way to call it. Conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories that today show themselves to not be such a conspiracy after all. I didn't want to scare you. I didn't want to alarm you. As we went on in time and we learned more and more, I was alarmed. It's kind of like something isn't right, but you're not sure what it is. From there, we would read some writings by Tex Mars, but he would refuse. He'd go so far and not go any further. None dare call it conspiracy because you're a nut, a kook, a tinfoil hat wearer. When the Clintons came into power, a lot of information came out, but not in the mainstream media. I know nothing of Fox News back then. I know that the people who run it are liberals, but it makes them money to have the guise of conservative. leaning. And I think some of the men and women who are announcers or whatever you call them that, do the news and whatnot, talk show hosts, I don't know. I think they sincerely are alarmed, but they can only go so far with what they can and cannot say. So we learned some very appalling things. We learned about something called the Illuminati, which later would be joked about and become video games and even a card game for young people. A joke, a conspiracy. We learned about the Clintons. During their tenure from Rose Law Firm on, a lot of people that were associated with them died in very unusual ways. 58 or more people, maybe the number's larger now, I'm not sure. Vince Foster was one of those people. Nobody thought he was depressed. But it looks like he killed himself. There was the Mena, Arkansas airport scandal, where they believed that the Clintons were involved in drug running. That would later have a connection in Texas, where a compound in Waco would be attacked. Nobody ever talked about the fact that David Koresh and the other leaders of that group were writing to local government, telling them what they suspected was going on in a field behind their compound. Well, we know how that ended. And there was a state trooper and his wife who had sounded the alarm about the Clintons because he had been involved in protecting them or, being there for when the Clintons would do whatever. I don't even remember their names, but I remember hearing about it in the 90s, and what happened to them was the most horrifying thing I've ever heard of in my life. And I got to go to a meeting where an ex-CIA agent spoke about it and told what he believed happened and said he was very sorry that he had been involved in that administration and those people before that administration. I think he died also under very suspicious circumstances. So what am I trying to tell you? Be afraid, be very afraid? No, that's just not going to help, is it? I feel apprehensive. I feel like we're in terrible trouble and there's no turning back. But I wanted to tell you how it all started and my political leanings, which aren't just conservative. They go beyond that. I go far beyond even any government controls, because God gave us the right to be fruitful and multiply, to occupy till He comes. And I know that I've gone back and forth with the God of my understanding because I just get so angry and so bitter. But I can't help from all the learning I have done. When I see a thing going on in the world, a Bible verse pops up in my head and I think, is this happening now? Is that what God was talking about? I'm going to continue to make these videos. I don't know if they can survive YouTube. if that's the case, I'll go to another platform. I understand a lot of YouTubers are going to that platform now for freedom of speech. And perhaps I'll go there too. I'll let you know in the future. But right now, I just want to start with something very simple. How it all started and how your dad and I suddenly had our eyes open to another part of reality that we didn't know about, that we weren't aware of. I'm going to call it straight and simple: the threat of communism, the threat of dictatorship, the threat of oppression, and the loss of all freedoms. This is why I so strongly support the Second Amendment. Who was it in history that said that the government, especially big government, could become a fearful taskmaster? They knew. They came from Europe, when the landowners oppressed the plebes. I feel it's never changed. The Roman Empire, I feel like we still are living in the Roman Empire. We've never really freed ourselves from the chains that bind us and hold us down. The rich want it all, and they're a very small portion of those that are on the face of the earth, and they are very protected because they can buy their protection. So my channel is changing. Maybe I'll joke around again someday, but right now it's not a joke. None of this is a joke. All those conspiracy theories from the 80s and 90s and before are coming true today. When laws change, depending on your political persuasion, if you're this politic, you're protected from the law. And if you're this politic, anything goes. You need to be aware. I know you want to live your life, and I know you don't want to be bothered with this. Was it Solzhenitsyn who said, when it happened to my enemy, I said nothing? When it happened to my neighbor, I said nothing. But when they came for me, it was too late. They couldn't say anything. So I'm saying it now, before I can't say it ever again. And I might be old and I might be half crippled, but I'm still a force to be reckoned with. And I will use it however I have to. And even if one person sees this, and even if all of my subscribers flee to another happy channel, so be it. I'm standing my ground here and now. And I want to tell you, my girl, how this started and what I learned and what I believe now. And I'm going to do it in a series of videos that I will publish. This is my unfortunate story, and I'm sticking to it. I hope you see this one day, and that the winds of change will turn you back around.